Welcome to the Inspire to Invest podcast, where we're sharing stories from real estate investors and how investing has changed their lives. This episode of the Inspire to Invest podcast has been brought to you by HoneyTree REIT and PropertyCast.io. Hey everybody, welcome to Inspire to Invest. I have Mark Gonneau here with me from Toronto. He is an award-winning real estate investor who began investing at the age of 24 while he was still a student. And since then, he's invested in all various forms of different real estate, not only in Canada, but also abroad. And he's currently the owner of 250 units across 40 properties worth more than $70 million. So just a few units. He was
Give or
named
take.
the top 10 investor in Ontario in 2008, 9, 11, 14, and 15. And he's also Player of the Year in 2014 from the Real Estate Investment Network. He is currently focused on helping professionals and business owners grow their nest egg and their wealth by investing in value-add real estate opportunities. He's also the co-founder of HoneyTree Real Estate Investment REIT, which focuses on boutique hotels and multifamily. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with us here.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. So obviously you got started fairly young. So how did this get on your radar when you're still a student?
The longer version of the story is the first time I went out looking to invest in real estate, my brother had to drive because I didn't have a driver's license yet. He was 16, I was 15, and we were looking at pooling the money that we had together to see if we could invest something in something. We grew up in Muskoka,
Yeah.
and so basically, if you can imagine, I mean, back then, of course, there was no MLS on online. There was no internet
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
time. So it was the books that would come out every Thursday to the real estate brokerages. And so imagine a 15 and a 60-year-old kid coming into a real estate brokerage asking about buying some real estate.
Yeah.
And yeah, they were kind enough to give us sort of an outdated book and let
Yeah.
us go take a look. We looked and basically decided very quickly that while we might be able to afford a bush lot, there really wasn't much that we could do with it. So we kind of shelved that for a few years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
That's really interesting. So I guess in terms of your first acquisition then at the ripe old age of 24, what was that? And then how
so
did you kind of leverage that to scale into other things?
Yeah, so that was a property here in Toronto. I was actually still a student, and so so my brother and I decided we were going to try to tackle this real estate thing again. And of course,
Yeah.
I mean, we're not from a real estate family. I'm not even quite sure how we got this into our heads, but we decided we were going to try and tackle the real estate thing again. So we looked at like buying a two-bedroom condo. I would live in one, get a roommate for the other. The
Yeah.
math didn't quite pencil out on that, so we shelved that for another year.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a roommate of at the time, my roommate, and we decided to go out and take a look again. We ended up finding a three-bedroom semi that we ended up buying, which was an interesting story.
Yeah.
And we ended up buying that, and of course, I remember calling my dad up the next day and saying, "Great news, we bought a house." He said, "Hey,
Yeah.
that's fantastic." And like any 24-year-old kid at the time, I said, "So all I need you to do is co-sign on the mortgage."
Of
My
course.
dad,
Yeah.
my dad says, "I'm not going to do that."
Yeah.
And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Mark, I've never been in debt in my life. I've never had a mortgage. I'm certainly not going to start with you."
Yeah.
And to which I said, "Well, Craig's dad is going to co-sign the mortgage." And my
Yeah.
dad says, "Well, that's good for Craig, but I'm still not going to co-sign a mortgage for you."
Yeah.
And then I said, "But we've already bought the house." My dad says, "Well, you should have thought of this sooner."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the first. So I ended up calling my brother, and like I said, he's a year and a half older than me, and he had recently graduated. And called him up and said, "Hey, do you want to invest in a house?" And he said, "Sure." So he ended up going in on the mortgage, and
Nice.
Craig, me, and my brother all chipped in 10 grand, and for the down payment on what
Yeah.
was a $229,000 semi in Toronto.
Wow. Which is probably worth like 1.5 million today.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
Yeah, easily. So then where did it go from there? Like when you finished university, did you go directly into real estate thinking that it would become what it is today, or did you work somewhere else for a while and then, come back around to the concept that this is something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, so I mean, we ended up selling the house when we graduated, which was the plan.
Yeah,
What wasn't the plan was, I mean, we thought we'd get a couple of classmates in there. We'd be in there for the 3 remaining years that we had in the program,
yeah,
and then we sell it when we graduated. I think we had 18 different people roll through that house over 3 years because, of course,
yeah,
students are just so mobile. But we sold the property. I went and played in the real world. I actually am a chiropractor, so bought a clinic and was doing that and paid off some student loans. And then a few years later, started investing with my brother.
yeah. Interesting. You're not the first chiropractor turned real estate investor that I know.
Interesting. I'd like to meet the other one.
Yeah, I can definitely introduce you. They're actually a realtor with Rec Media or Rec Now. So maybe you know them kind of through the grapevine and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely some parallel there. So obviously you're working as a chiropractor now. You've kind of got this business underway. So where then did this $70 million portfolio come from? Because obviously that's like a got to be a big journey, right?
Yeah, so I mean, my brother and I started, and we started buying student rentals and townhouses, and we sort of looked at it as we were buying the student rentals for cash flow and
Yeah.
the townhomes for appreciation. We sort of did
Right.
like buy a student rental, buy a townhouse, buy a
Oh,
student rental, buy a
there you go.
townhouse,
Yeah.
and so we started doing that, and then graduated from there. I started buying some duplexes, and then ended up buying some multifamily buildings. Kind of took a break about a decade ago, actually. Took a break when I sold my clinics. Well, I gave away my clinics, but when I stopped with the clinics, took a break and yeah, sort of retired. At that point, I had probably a little over 100 doors under my belt. And the plan was to basically retire and live off of those.
Yeah.
And then my current partner, Dave, we were introduced by a mutual property manager, said that we should sort of meet up and see what happened.
Yeah.
He wanted to partner up right away. Admittedly, I resisted for the first few years because I still wasn't planning on getting back into the real estate world. But eventually, after a couple of years, I started seeing people that I was ahead of sort of catch up and surpass me in terms of the number of units and the size of portfolio that they had. I guess I'm a little bit of a competitive person, so I decided to get back into it. So started back in working with Dave and some other partners, and we went out and we bought a number of multifamily properties and now hotels.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess were you focusing your portfolio primarily in the GTA at that point in time, or were you looking outside as well?
So initially it was actually Simcoe County, Barrie and Aurelia that we started,
Okay.
then moved down into Hamilton. From there, actually, I went out west to Edmonton and then even northeastern BC.
Nice. Yeah, I'm always curious because obviously the price point in Toronto is high and it's probably the highest now that it's ever been. So I'm always curious to see if people, started here, if they did kind of go outside of their own backyard. When you look now at the growth that you've had and the experiences you've had, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges and obstacles that you've faced as you have grown?
Interesting. I mean, obviously, these past year and a half with the current interest rate environment and just the economic environment in general, this last year and a half has certainly been tough for a lot of real estate investors.
Yeah.
Anybody who's had any sort of construction projects on the go, anybody who's in sort of variable mortgages or
Yeah.
private financing. I mean, I've got a number of projects on the go where I've seen the interest rate go from 7% to 14% over the
Ooh,
past year and a bit. Uh,
wow.
and obviously that affects your cash flow. And it's yeah, it's fun to have a completely empty building with a $40,000 a month mortgage.
Yeah.
And so there's certainly that. But at the same time, I mean, I've invested in northeastern BC, which is an oil and gas region that
Yeah.
when I first started investing there, I was getting phenomenal cash flow.
Yeah.
The price point to rent in the area was amazing. Then the bottom sort of fell out of the oil and gas market,
Yeah.
and then we were facing 30% vacancy and rents cut in half.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of sort of ups and downs. I mean, I've lived through what was the gold rush of 2020 and
Yeah.
2021 when it came to real estate, and saw property values appreciate significantly, and that posed its own problems from a
Yeah.
standpoint of I was out there trying to acquire properties when everybody was just going crazy over them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's I've been through a lot, and it just happens when you've been doing this for 26 years, 27
Yeah.
years now.
So what would you say are some of the biggest lessons that come out of that? Because obviously, I think what we're seeing now is a lot of these companies that started and maybe just more in their infancy, because it's been in the last, say, 3 to 5 years or something, and some of them are folding, and there's a lot of distress happening and stuff like that. So when you did experience something like interest rates doubling, going from 7 to 14, or like going through that oil and gas bust kind of in like the 2015, 2016, like how did you manage that to overcome it and then come out successfully on the other side?
So I think the main thing, I mean, a smart person once said real estate is a get rich slow play. And the thing is to take it slow. A lot of the people right now that are having difficulty are the people that tried to go too fast.
Yeah,
And they didn't have the financial resources, the financial wherewithal within them to
yeah,
be able to survive. I mean, I've sold a couple properties in the past couple of years in order to generate additional capital so that I can pay mortgages and pay
yeah,
lenders and pay construction and all that sort of stuff. If I didn't have that base where I had a number of properties that have been paying off their mortgages for the past 10, 15, 20 years,
yeah,
then it would be very difficult for me. I
yeah,
don't like selling the properties, but I also know that to sell a property today to free up an extra 100,000 will allow me to make an extra two, three, 400,000 on the current properties.
yeah,
So it's that's the biggest thing is go slow.
yeah.
That'll
Yeah, I do understand what you're saying. I think that that's something that I've directly seen with some of the active investors, that they scaled way too fast.
Mhm.
And in some instances, raised money on debt as opposed to equity. It's not sustainable. And then now a lot of the access to that kind of lending has disappeared due to different reasons. And now they're all, just walking that line, right? So anything could kind of topple them over. But flipping to the more positive side, when
Yeah.
you do look at your experience over the last 2.5 decades, what would you say you're most proud of?
Um, Oh, these are different questions than other podcasts I've been on. Um, I mean, I'm proud of the fact that I've been able to do this and still have a great balance with my family and being
Yeah,
able, like, I mean, the whole point of doing this is not so you can try to make as much money as you can. It's not so
yeah,
that you can drive the fancy car. I mean, I've driven the fancy cars. They get boring. I mean, it's fun,
for
but
a
at the
time,
same
yeah,
time, yeah, but at the same time, I mean, you're not going to drive a Ferrari as a daily driver.
yeah,
I didn't buy the Ferrari. I rented the Ferrari when I was in Italy. It was a blast,
yeah,
but I drive a 10-year-old Jeep now.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's but so I mean, I do this for my family. I do this so I can have spend time with my family. I mean, starting the REIT was something that I didn't have to do, but I did it because I wanted to really pass on that legacy to my kids and potentially my future grandkids.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's what it's all about. Like a lot of people talk about return on investment, but at the end of the day, it's really the return on time that I think matters more than anything. And,
Mhm.
obviously, if you can then leave that legacy for your family as well, then that's just the icing on the cake. So on that note, we're just going to take a really brief break for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. I value transparency, integrity, and trust. If you choose to work with me, you can be assured that business will be conducted honestly and openly. Time is of the essence in this industry, so you can expect nothing short of quick, clear communication from me. I'll keep you informed every step of the way so you feel comfortable throughout this entire process. Our homes are where we eat, sleep, relax, and play. My clients' best interests are at the heart of everything I do. And with this said, my service to you doesn't end when the transaction does. As your realtor, I'll not only help you buy and sell your property, I'll also educate and support you along the way. I want to help you fulfill your goal of home ownership and become your trusted real estate resource for life. I can't wait to share my passion for real estate with you. More importantly, find you the perfect house to turn into your home. Looking to buy, sell, or invest in Durham Region or Toronto? Let's chat. Is the real estate investment you're considering a gold mine or a landmine? Introducing PropertyCast.io, the black magic of real estate investment analysis. Use PropertyCast.io to analyze and underwrite real estate investment opportunities, unlock the potential of a property, and share professional reports. Jordan McGregor is a commercial realtor and founder of PropertyCast.io. He identified the need to simplify and streamline how properties are underwritten to help investors make better decisions and sound investments. PropertyCast.io is a best-in-class purpose-built tool for real estate investment analysis. To find out more, go to PropertyCast.io, and to sign up, click the link in the show notes. Inspired to Invest is proud to support the Beyond Success program. In today's complex world, it's absolutely crucial for our youth to learn how to take charge of their financial future. We believe that every young person deserves access to accurate, practical financial information. Designed to bridge the gap, the Beyond Success program leverages a comprehensive educational bootcamp to equip young minds with essential financial literacy skills. At Beyond Success, it's not just about teaching financial literacy, it's also about fostering a foundation for a prosperous and empowered future. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Hey everybody, welcome back to Inspired to Invest. I have Mark Gonneau here with me. He is the co-founder of HoneyTree Real Estate Investment Trust. And I think he's kind of touched a little bit of everything, and he's here still today. So I think that speaks volumes. One of the things that I really love to ask real estate investors on my show is, what's the craziest thing that you've experienced as a real estate investor?
Oh, the stories I could tell.
Or like the top two, if you can narrow them down.
Yeah, well, I mean, so one all is one that we finally are just coming through the other side of right now, which was we bought an 18-unit building in Hamilton in January. We closed it January 11th, 2021. There were a couple of individuals in that building that let's just say had some dependency issues. Put things so they did not pay rent from the day that we bought the building. They were actively dealing drugs out of the unit. They single-handedly caused a lot of other tenants to leave the building, working with landlord-tenant board to try to get them out.
Yeah.
Taking months and months and months. Finally, after about a year and a half, we finally had a judgment against them, and in order to have them evicted, only to have the individual who was on the lease pass away from an overdose, which you think would actually help the situation because they're dead.
Yeah.
And their next of kin signed documents to have us take over the unit,
Yeah.
only for one of his friends to claim to have been a occupant of that unit. So then we had to start the process all over again to have his friend evicted, the entire time not
Wow.
paying rent, the entire time inviting all their other addict friends into the building, again
Yeah.
dealing drugs out of the building, all sorts of nastiness going on.
Yeah.
It wasn't until January 24th, 2024 that we were finally able to evict them and get the sheriff to get them out. And we're
Yeah.
now like and of course we had to renovate the unit top to bottom, everything right down to the subfloor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just I mean, it was just a disaster the way the
Yeah.
unit was left. So
Wow.
yeah.
And I mean, it really begs the question, like, why the LTV, not only here, but there's a lot of other places, they obviously really sway towards the tenants. And I think just in these extenuating circumstances that there should be something in place that allows you to escalate a situation, right? Like, this isn't
Yeah.
just a general circumstance. Like it's a health and
Yep.
safety issue. Like there's a lot of different things. And I
Oh,
just really
the
believe
police were
like,
there a couple times a week.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I just think as a property owner with reasonable notice, whether that's like 3 months or even 6 months, like you should really be able to take control of your property and do what needs to be done. And yeah, I feel like that's why I've kind of stayed away from Ontario, me personally, but you're a brave soul. So,
Yeah, I mean the landlord tenant board is broken right now. There's no doubt
yeah,
about it in Ontario. I mean, we can talk about how there obviously is a continuum of rights, and it shouldn't be all completely on the landlord. It shouldn't be all the completely on the tenant
yeah,
as well.
yeah,
There are lots of other jurisdictions in Canada that have strong landlord tenant legislation but don't have a 9 to 10 month wait to get a hearing,
yeah,
that are able to get in there quickly and make a decision quickly that can be fair to the tenant or the landlord, depending on the circumstance,
yeah,
or preferably both, fair to both. But the main thing is being able to deal with the issue quickly and effectively.
yeah. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Now, I assume that somewhere along the way you probably got some coaching and education and mentorship.
Mhm.
Maybe you can speak a little bit to that and as well, like maybe what some of the best advice you've ever been given is.
Yeah, I mean, I was a RAIN member for God, 15 years probably. So that's where I got most of my education. And when it comes to this, a lot of it was self-taught, but a lot of it came from Rain. And of
Yeah,
course, all the other people within Rain. I mean, once you've been there for when you were there as long as I was, as I say, like all the old guys, not that we're old and not that we're all guys, but all the old people that had been around for a while, they're all out in the back of the room. They're all outside of the room
yeah,
talking, sharing stories, sharing best practices, not actually inside the room. So that certainly was where I got a lot of information and a lot of help
yeah.
from just other investors.
Yeah. Is there anything that any of them passed down to you in terms of nuggets of wisdom that you hold near and dear to you today?
I can't really put my finger on any. I mean, obviously there's lots of nuggets that are shared over the years,
Yeah.
but like I said, the main thing is just treating it like a business and going slow.
Yeah.
Not going so fast and then getting caught.
Yeah. No, I think that that obviously makes sense. When it comes to lessons, is there anything that you wish you would have learned sooner that maybe would have changed a decision that you made when it came to an acquisition or something that you did along the way?
Yeah, I mean, you can always go back and say I could have done it better. But that's, I mean, as I say, I mean, hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I mean, I've done quite well. Could I have done better? Yes, of course. But at the same time, could I have invested in Amazon stock when it was $6? So like you
Yeah.
can like you can always do better. But I think what I've been able to accomplish is obviously quite good. And I also know that despite my age, I've still got a long ways to go, and we're scaling quite large right now in terms of with the REIT
Yeah.
and being able to acquire larger and larger buildings and really build a much more robust business around the properties.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's great. Now, obviously, you just touched on one point that leads to my next question in terms of what's next for you. So, where do you want to take the REIT? And do you have a particular financial freedom number in mind? You talked at one point about number of doors and things like that, but would it be, the size of the REIT, the volume of cash flow that you have coming in? Like, what would you say you're reaching for?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a specific financial freedom number because quite frankly, if I wanted to, I mean, I didn't even have to get back into real estate. I mean, I had enough properties that I could have just been satisfied with what I had, I guess.
Yeah.
And admittedly, some days I wonder why I am still going with this and
Yeah.
why I am working hard at it. But like I said, I'm doing this for future generations. I'm doing this for
Mhm.
my kids. I'm doing this for my future grandkids. I don't have specific numbers in mind in terms of I want to hit X number of doors or I want to hit X number of assets under management.
Yeah.
In a way, those are kind of irrelevant. I mean, right now, I want to make sure that I keep good balance with my family. I want to make sure that I'm able to attend hockey practice with my son or figure skating or dance with my daughter,
Yeah.
yet still have a business that is top notch, both in terms of what we're able to do for the investors, but also what we're able to do for the guests and tenants.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now, just speaking to HoneyTree being a REIT, can you talk a little bit about the benefit when that comes to being a passive investor in a product like that?
Yeah, so I mean, the reason why we chose to set up the REIT in the first place was it allowed us to scale much more because it allowed us to actually bring in outside investors other than just sort of close friends and family. We knew what we were doing was able to generate some great returns. This allowed us to allow more people to participate in things that they wouldn't normally participate in, whether that's a multifamily building or what we're doing right now that's quite unique is
Yeah,
the hotels. So if you're a passive investor, because I mean, this is the thing. I am a passive investor in other REITs, and I have been throughout my whole process, despite the fact that I've also been an active investor in building my portfolio.
yeah,
You don't have to be one or the other. You can definitely be both.
yeah,
The passive investments allows you to use registered funds, which you can't really use as an active investor. The passive investments allow you to diversify, whether that's into other geographic areas or whether
yeah,
that's into other property types.
yeah. No, that's awesome. Now, one thing I always like to ask guests is, what's a quote that inspires you? Obviously, the name of the podcast is Inspired to Invest, so I like to know what motivates my guests.
Again, I don't really have a quote, I would say that inspires me, but certainly, I mean, my kids inspire me. They inspire me to basically try to make their world better.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. Now, for anyone that wants to get in touch with you to learn more about opportunities that you might have, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Best way to reach me is email. So Mark, M-A-R-K, at honeytreegrow.ca. And I'm
Great.
sure you'll have that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, yeah, we'll definitely include that below. Thank you again for your time, for being with us today. And of course, for anyone that's watching, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode. And also follow along at Inspired to Invest podcast on social. And remember, when you invest in yourself, the sky's the limit. Thanks again. The views represented on this podcast are for general
Thank you to
information
HoneyTree
only
REIT and
and does
PropertyCast.io
not
for
constitute
bringing you
investment
this
or other
episode of
professional
Inspired
advice
to
or an
Invest.
offering of securities. The host and guests featured on Inspired to Invest make no representations as to the performance of any particular investment. Should you decide to make an investment, you are responsible for conducting your own review and analysis. It is recommended that you obtain independent legal, accounting, and tax advice from licensed professionals.